A big week in the URC, every win and every point is crucial at this stage. My name is Mark, let's talk rugby. Not too many rounds left in the regular season now, and it really is, coming down to the wire, and still a lot of teams in that mix for the playoff places. Just way more than we've seen any other season. But the next kind of couple of rounds, so we've got this round coming up, then there's a break for Champions Cup, then we're back again. But by the time we're down to 2 or 3 rounds to go, some of those teams are going to start dropping out of the race for the top 8, and this is where teams can prevent themselves being one of those teams that kind of get discarded. So really important fixtures this weekend. Lots of big games as well, and it should be another exciting game of rugby. Good thing for me, I've got the weekend off. So, this week has been fairly busy for me because I'm actually transitioning into a new job. So first week of my new job here, and, work-wise is going pretty well. It's hours a little bit different than I was on before, so I have to get used to that. But, the fact now that I'm going to have more weekends off is going to be good because it means I get to watch more rugby. So I'm going to be covering as many games as I can this weekend, and we'll have, reviews of them up on the channel. And also we're going to have a round review as we usually do. Okay, so let's talk about the games this weekend. So we're going to start with the Friday games. The first one is Friday, March 28th, 7:35 kickoff in the evening. It's Ulster versus DHL Stormers. This is 9th versus 8th, and it's at the Kingspan Stadium. So it's on Premier Sport, GG Carr, URC TV, and Now Sports as well. But yeah, if you're watching Ireland, it's on GG Carr. So let's talk about these two. Ulster, maybe you might think they were a little bit lucky to win last time out against the Dragons. Like, the Dragons had a fantastic start on that one, but Ulster, the last 7, they've won only 3 of the last 7, but they picked up wins in the last 2. So in that sequence, lost to Leinster, then they lost to Munster, they beat Connacht, they lost to Zebre by a point. Zebre getting that away win there. Then they lost to Benetton by 15 points, beat Scarlets narrowly, and then beat Dragons narrowly last time out. So, Ulster still a ways off, I think, hitting, top form, especially compared to, a couple of seasons ago. Like, they are in a transitionary period, but still, they haven't really hit any consistent form this season. Stormers, another team who've been up and down all season. They've won 4 of the last 7, and basically they have 3 defeats bookended by 2 wins either side. So the wins in the start of the sequence: beat the Lions handily, then beat the Sharks narrowly, lost to Leinster, then the Bulls narrowly, lost to the Lions, and then they beat the Bulls in the return game, and they beat the Scarlets last time out. So both teams kind of up and down a little bit, but both coming into this game on 2-game winning streaks, which, they haven't gone much, higher than that really this season, either of these teams. So to go on to a 3-game winning streak going into those last kind of 4 rounds really could give them the momentum, and the fact that they're, 1 point between them in the table. They're in 8th and 9th. Like, the Stormers have that place that Ulster want. And I think this is going to be a really big contest between these two, especially when you think like that, in terms of the Stormers, like, they don't have anything to worry about in terms of, we've seen last year, like, the European fixtures, they're not going to put too much, stock in that. And, can Ulster maybe the same? Like, Ulster, they did sneak into the Champions Cup last 16, but I don't see them resting too many players, honestly, ahead of that game against Bordeaux Begley next week. I think they're going to pick a strong side for this one. They should have some of their Irish internationals back who've been in the Ireland squad, but haven't necessarily been actually seeing game time. So that should be a boost to them. And, expecting it to be a fairly strong Stormers team as well. So how do I see the game going? It's kind of tough on this one, honestly, because you could definitely make an argument for either of these teams win this game, I think. And I think it is really close. I think the losing team is definitely going to come away with a bonus point. I'm not sure, for both teams as well, defense hasn't been great. Attack has looked a little bit better than it has early on in the season. So it might be one of those ones where the loser actually comes away with 2 bonus points. But I'm going to plug for an Ulster win, but very narrowly in that one. Okay, next game then of the weekend is Edinburgh versus the Dragons. So this also Friday, March 28th, 7:35 kickoff. It's at the Hive Stadium. This is 11th versus 16th. And it's on Premier Sport. You're going to be able to find it as well on Now TV and your CTV as well. So these two teams, not in fantastic form, although Edinburgh, when you compare them to the Dragons, they're at least in some sort of form. 3 of the last 7 isn't too bad. It's pretty much the same as Ulster, but they've only won 1 of the last 4. Then Dragons, they're on that losing streak basically since the opening day. So they've lost 12 on the bounce, but 7, we're looking at the sequence, the last 7 they've lost on the trot. So Edinburgh, earlier on in the sequence, a bit better. They beat Benetton, then they lost to the Warriors, then they beat the Warriors, then back-to-back losses against Scarlets and then Zebre. Then they beat Munster, and kind of a bit of a turnaround for them. But then last time out, then they lost narrowly to Benetton. That was one of the many games last week that went down to the final few minutes. Then the Dragons, their run, as I said, 7 defeats in a row. Lost to Cardiff, then Cardiff again, Scarlets, then Munster, then they lost to Glasgow, and they lost to Zebre. And then last time out, a narrow defeat against Ulster. They had a 12-point lead. I think they're 12-0 up against Ulster. And they were actually looking pretty good in that game, but just couldn't produce anything really in the final quarter to be able to actually go on and win the game. I think, we have seen improvement in their performance, which is well overdue. I think they're the one team this year who haven't had kind of a proper purple patch in terms of form. And a lot of time we've seen them, the heads are going down and stuff like that. Whereas they showed a lot of fight against Ulster, still didn't get the result, but certainly an improvement from them. And I'm hoping for an improvement for them again in this one. But, I'm wearing the Edinburgh jersey. I'm not going to back against them. So I'm going to go for an Edinburgh win in this one. But maybe Dragons will sneak a losing bonus point out of it as well. Okay, on to the next game then. So on to the Saturday games. Early game is Saturday, March 29th, 12:45 kickoff. I think that's 2:45 if you're watching in South Africa. But don't take my word for that. Go check your local listings. But this is Vodacom Bulls versus Zebre Parma. It's 3rd versus 15th, and it's at Loftus Versfeld. It's on Premier Sports, and as usual, I won't keep repeating it because every one of these games you're going to be able to find on your CTV, and then certainly a selection of them, if not all of them, will be on Now TV as well. So Bulls versus Zebre. If you had any other time, you would have just said, "Yep, Bulls win." Pretty simple for that, right? But you can't discount Zebre anymore. They've actually been doing well, and if we look at the form, they're actually both in pretty much identical form. Bulls have won 4 of the last 7. Zebre have won 4 of the last 7. And in the last 4, Zebre actually in, better form. Bulls 2 out of 4, Zebre 3 out of 4. And they came close as well, to beating the Sharks last time out. That could have been 4 out of 4, including a win down in South Africa. And who in the right mind would have thought that Zebre would come anywhere close to winning down in South Africa? It's crazy, but it just shows we've been talking about this team for a long time in terms of the good recruitment they've done. How well they're actually managing their resources there as well, and we've seen the improvements season on season from them, and that's why they're in this position now. It's not some kind of fluke or some kind of, just luck that suddenly they're playing well. They've put in the hard work, on the field, on the training paddock, and also, in terms of the whole system there, off the field as well, in terms of the, getting the right people in terms of whether it's coaches, support staff, players, etc. They really have done things properly, and it just shows what you can do on a small budget, in this league, to get yourselves, they're honestly competitive now, and it's very hard to argue that they're not. But the Bulls, at Loftus, that's a big ask. But let's have a look at their last 7 for each. So starting with the Bulls, they lost to the Sharks, then 2 wins on the bounce against the Lions and then the Stormers. Then they lost against the Sharks in the return. They beat the Lions in their return, and then they lost to the Stormers, and then they beat Leinster last time out by a point. So they were losing at 80 minutes, 84 minutes. Then they have a penalty. I think it was Creel, was it? Landed the 84th minute penalty to win the game. So fair play to them there. It just shows, even if their form has been up and down a little bit compared to, what we used to see from the Bulls, that they still have the wherewithal to do something like that. Zebre then, their sequence, that win against the Ospreys, then 2 losses on the bounce, Benetton by a point, and then Benetton by 12. Then they beat Ulster by a point, beat Edinburgh by 5 points. They beat the Dragons by 10, and then lost narrowly to the Sharks last week by a point. So, serious team now, this Zebre team. And, the amazing thing is, we talked about Benetton's journey going from, one of the whipping boys of not just the URC, but the Pro 14 before that, etc. And building their way up to first being competitive at home to winning at home, then being competitive on the road to winning away. And then, they won the Rainbow Cup as well, right? And now they've been kind of consistently up there around kind of the top 10 in the league, always pushing for playoff places as well. It feels like they just need a little bit more to take the extra step to be one of those teams that are always there in the top 8. They're not too far away from it. But Zebre, they've almost had an accelerated path this year compared to Benetton's journey, in that, like, the last few seasons they've been competitive at home. They've won at home, but not too often. This year now, like, competitive at home, winning at home, competitive on the road, and winning on the road. So massive, kudos to them for that. But having said all that, I do think that, the Bulls are going to take out the win in this one. But don't be surprised if at some stage in the game, Zebre actually have the lead. But I think, the Bulls are going to come out on top. And I'm not sure, like, it's going to be close. I think Zebre are going to be maybe, a score to 2 scores away. They might get a losing bonus point, but they might lose by something like 12 or 14 points. So it's going to be somewhere in that margin, I think, 7 to 14 points probably, the margin. So I'm going to go for a Bulls win in that one. Okay. Next then we have an Irish derby. So it's a 2:30 kickoff on Saturday, March 19th. It's Connacht versus Munster. This is 12th versus 6th on Premier Sport. And also, if you're watching in Ireland, it's on TG Car. So this is in the Hastings Insurance MacLeod Park. So I don't know, stupid sponsors, right? But yeah, that's apparently where it is. And they complain about, Twickenham being renamed Allianz. But yeah, this should be a decent game because, Connacht always play nice rugby. They're always attacking. They do kind of forget to defend at times. And then Munster, although it's been a bad run from the last couple of rounds, the attack is game on game is starting to look better for them. So if they can get that firing, this could really be a ding-dong battle. I think it's probably going to be one again where both teams are going to come away with try bonus points. But Connacht, they've won 2 of the last 7, and actually those 2 have been in the last 3. Munster have won 4 of the last 7, but only 1 of the last 3. So the Connacht run in that sequence then lost to the Bulls, then Leinster, followed by Ulster, followed by Warriors, then wins against Cardiff and Benetton, and then last week then that narrow defeat against Ospreys. That Ospreys game, 43 points to 40, just crazy. And Connacht were 14 points or 15 points away behind at one stage. I think it was 43-28, and then they managed to come back then, a couple of tries late on to get themselves that losing bonus point, and then 6 tries for both teams as well, and that absolutely crazy. Munster then in their sequence wins against the Lions and then Ulster. Then they lost to Leinster and bounced back with a win against the Dragons, and it followed up with another win against Scarlets. Then the last 2 lost against Edinburgh, a bit kind of out of the blue because Edinburgh were coming out off the back of that defeat to Zebre. But Munster didn't turn up at all in that game, and then lost to Glasgow by 3 points as well. So the lost to both Scottish teams back to back there. But again, they have shown improvements through their performance in both of those in terms of their their forwards. Both teams should have the players who were with the Ireland squad back with them. All teams now should have all their internationals back, so it'll be a bit more of a level playing field, although like some teams are obviously going to rest players for Champions Cup, especially Leinster, because their squad are already down in South Africa. But both of these I would expect to really go for this one. It's an Irish derby, and both teams can see given their positions in the league, like Connacht are just 3 points behind Munster in the league, so if they win, they could leapfrog them. And then Munster, they know if they can win this one, they have a good chance then of kind of lifting themselves above that kind of pack, from Cardiff down really on 35 points, there on 34, that if they get a win, they could start putting a little bit of daylight between themselves and the massive queue of teams below them in the table at the minute. So this one, it's a tough one again to pick, but I'm going to plug for a Munster win, but I think both teams will get try bonus points out of the game. Okay, next then we have a Welsh derby. So again, all the Welsh players, that have actually restored a bit of pride, even though they didn't win, certainly restored some pride to their, to their nation in the last couple of rounds. Even though, you look at the England game and they got thumped, but the Irish game was really good. The second half of the game against Scotland was good, and England cut them apart a little bit, but it hasn't. I don't think it's dampened the renewed kind of optimism too much from that, because everybody kind of realizes that Matt Sharrett's in there. He's an interim coach, and it wasn't going to be completely turned around overnight. They weren't going to, although there would have been a little inkling of maybe we have a chance against England before the game, right? That's just human nature, right? Your team starts, a couple of things start to click, and you think, oh, we get a decent start against them, maybe. So maybe that was there, but I think most people would have been realistic and thinking, okay, we're going to lose to England, but then we're going to go to our summer tour in Japan, and we should get a win to end that losing streak. But these two teams, have, I think, in terms of how Welsh rugby has improved over the last couple of seasons, these two teams definitely involved in that. And it's, 8 o'clock kickoff, 3 o'clock kickoff. So Saturday, March 29th, Scarlets versus Ospreys. It's 14th versus 7th. It's at the Parky Scarlets, and it's on Premier Sport. So, going to be a very kind of exciting game to watch. I think both, again, it's another one where both teams have been decent on attack. I think Ospreys maybe in terms of all around, more well-rounded, I think, as a team than Scarlets. But Scarlets, when they turn it on, their attack just can be absolutely amazing. And they have a bit more of a dog about them this season, certainly compared to last season. And, up until a couple of rounds ago, they were actually Ospreys now in 7th and Scarlets in 14th. Those teams were pretty much reversed. Scarlets were the ones up there with Cardiff in the top 8, and Ospreys were the team who were looking for, to work their way further up the table. But Scarlets, they won 2 of their last 7, and they've lost the last 3 on the bounce, so kind of lost their way a little bit. Whereas Ospreys have won 4 of the last 7. They had 1 draw in there as well. So if we look at Scarlet's sequence, they lost against Glasgow, then to Ospreys by a point. So, that was in December. Then they beat the Dragons, they beat Edinburgh, lost against Munster, then Ulster narrowly, and then they lost against the Stormers by 12 points. The only team who, of the losing teams last week who didn't get a losing bonus point, but they were just denied it in 78th minute. I think the Stormers scored a try to deny them that losing bonus point. So they're very close in that, even though if you're looking at the scoreline, you think it wasn't as close. Then Ospreys in their sequence lost to Zebre. Then that game, obviously, to beat the Scarlets, drew against Cardiff. Then they beat Benetton handily. I think, was that game 43-0? I'm pretty sure it was. Then lost against Leinster narrowly. Gave them a decent game in that one. They won against Warriors as well, so really good form there, losing against the table toppers, beating the second place team in the table and the defending champions, and then they beat Connacht by 3 points last time out. We talked about that in the Connacht one. Scored 6 tries, but also conceded 6 tries. So defense not doing so well for them there. So looking at this, you look at the form book, you think Ospreys are going to take this one out, because in that sequence, they've only lost 1 of their last 6 games, whereas, as I said, Scarlets have lost 3 on the bounce. But I think actually Scarlets are going to come up. I'm going to go against kind of the logic of this, and I'm going to say Scarlets are actually going to pull off a win here, because I've seen bits and pieces from them that I think if they put it all together, they could certainly come up with a performance. I think, Welsh Derby as well, I think it's going to motivate them, and I'm going to go for a Scarlets win in that one. Okay, on to our next game then, and it is the Hollywood Bet Sharks versus Leinster. This is Saturday, March 29th. It's a 5:15 kickoff. I guess 7:15 if you're watching in South Africa. Again, check your local listings though. I might have the time difference wrong. It's 4th versus 1st. So real kind of top of the table clash here. And then it's at Hollywood Bets, Kings Park. It's on Premier Sport. And if you're watching in Ireland, it's on RTE as well. Okay. So this is an interesting one because, Leinster lost last week. And Sharks almost lost at home to Zebre. So both of those games, there was just a point in them. So the Sharks, they've won 5 of the last 7. Leinster won 6 of the last 7. And the defeat last week against the Bulls was their first of the season. So they've won 12 on the trot before that in the league, and actually 16, including their Champions Cup games in a row as well. So the Sharks then in their sequence, they beat the Bulls, then they lost against the Stormers, beat Cardiff, they beat the Bulls again, they lost against the Lions, they narrowly beat the Lions, and then very narrowly beat Zebre. Leinster in their sequence, They beat Ulster, then Connacht, then Munster, then the Stormers, then Ospreys narrowly, Cardiff, and then they lost narrowly against the Bulls last time out. So, looking at it, the Sharks, they've, some decent form. They're not in fourth place by accident this year, much better than they were in the league last year. Last year, they're hanging around kind of 13th, 14th place in the league for much of the campaign. And, they did have that, run in the Challenge Cup that actually saw them lift the trophy. But, this year, the focus seems to be on the URC, and it's certainly paying off for them. They're just a point behind South African rivals, the Bulls, there in third place as well. And, just 5 points back from Glasgow too. So, a win here really would kind of, cement their spot there in the top four, and maybe put pressure on the two teams directly above them as well. Getting a home quarterfinal would be, I think, massive for them as well. And they've got a 9-point gap over Cardiff. So at this stage, it feels like another couple of wins, and it's going to be very hard for anyone, Cardiff or Munster or whoever else, to actually close that gap to them. So this is a big game for them, and you're expecting a very strong team to be picked for it. Leinster, they picked a strong team last week compared to the teams they've sent to South Africa in recent years. Obviously, a lot of their frontline players away with Ireland, but still a very strong team. If you look, they had the likes of Slimani in there. They had Barrett. They had Deegan was in there. They had Snyman in there as well. A lot of kind of frontline guys, and then some guys who were kind of a step or two below that, but still overall a fairly strong team. And this one you're wondering now how strong the team is going to be, because next week they have that round of 16 Champions Cup game against Harlequins, and then you're thinking, are they going to put the likes of Slimani, Barrett and Snyman in again for this one from the start? Or are those guys maybe going to be on the bench for this one because they want to kind of keep them a little bit fresh for that game, because they're probably going to be, either starting or on the bench against Quins. So that's going to be an interesting one. But I'm going to assume, because they seem to have changed their policy on South Africa, like their South African tour, I'm going to assume that they're actually going to pick a fairly strong side for this one. And it's going to be a close game, I think. And maybe it's just a Leinster fan in me thinking this, but I think Leinster might actually pip this one. Again, it's one of these ones where if I was going with just logic, you have to back the Sharks to win this one. They're home. They're very tough to beat there at Kings Park. And, Leinster, it's not their first side. The Sharks are full of Springboks. But I guess it is a Leinster fan of me. I'm going to plug for a Leinster win in that one. But again, I think both teams are probably going to pick up some kind of bonus points in the game. Okay, next one then we have is another Saturday game. It's one of two 7:35 kickoffs. So it's Benetton versus Cardiff Rugby. It's 10th versus 5th. It's at the Stadio Monego. It's on Premier Sport. So, two teams who are, Cardiff riding up there in 5th place. Benetton 3 points, just 3 points behind them, but down in 10th place. So both teams certainly with ambitions to get into those last 8. Benetton, they won 4 of the last 7. Been again kind of patchy form for them. Cardiff have won 3 of the last 7 and had a draw in there as well. And the win last time out actually broke a sequence of 3 defeats on the bounce. So Cardiff were in kind of danger really of they got themselves in a decent position in the league up to 5th place. and they were kind of in danger of completely slipping back and back. They are kind of in the clutches, as it were, of the teams below them, but they were in danger of actually falling completely out of the playoff places if they had a loss last time out. So for both these teams, it's a big game. So Benetton, in their sequence, they lost against Edinburgh, then they beat Zebre again, then lost against Ospreys quite heavily, 43-0, beat Ulster quite handily, then lost against Connacht, and then they beat Edinburgh last time out by 3 points. Another game that went right down to the wire. Edinburgh certainly could have won that one. Then Cardiff, in their sequence, wins against the Dragons, two in a row. Then they drew against Ospreys. Then a loss against the Sharks, lost to Connacht, lost to Leinster, and then they beat the Lions last time by 3 points. So that was a decent win for them. It was a fairly close game there, but they were able to come out with a win in that one. And the Lions have been fairly competitive on the road this year as well. So how do you think this one is going to go? It's kind of tough because, again, both teams, although they're up there, like in around, like obviously Cardiff in the playoff places and Benetton very close to them, neither of them have been in spectacular form. So I think maybe home advantage edges this one. So I'm going to go for a Benetton win. Okay, last game of the round then is another 7:35 kickoff on Saturday. So it's Glasgow Warriors versus Emirates Lions. It's 2nd versus 13th. It's at Scotstoun Stadium and it's on Premier Sport. So, we have Glasgow. They're looking at Leinster, down in South Africa, and they've already picked up points on them last week with Leinster losing to the Bulls. They're hoping now this week again they can, get another win. The Sharks do them a favour, and then they close the gap on Leinster a little bit more. So, Glasgow, as long as they win their game, won't be, too unhappy that, the Sharks, who are obviously looking to hunt them down from 4th place, would get a win. I think they prefer that. I don't think, it's hard to guess, but they must have ambitions to, nick that top spot from Leinster. And it's not, there's 9 points between them. So if Leinster lost without a bonus point this week and Glasgow won with a bonus point, then there would only be 4 points between them. And basically that's, win a game and they don't, and then you're top of the league. So it's already that close there, that I don't think they'll be looking over their shoulder as much at the Sharks. If the Sharks beat Leinster, their ambition has to be, especially as defending champions, to try and get that top spot on the log. So they'll be looking, towards Leinster, I think, while it's on for them. At some point, if Leinster going a run, it might, especially if Leinster win this weekend, it might get to the point where it's actually not mathematically possible for Glasgow to catch them. At that stage, then they might start looking over the shoulder. But I think at this stage, they've got to be looking up rather than down. So Glasgow, in their sequence, they've won 5 of the last 7. Lions have won 2 of their last 7. So in Glasgow sequence, they beat Scarlets narrowly, then beat Edinburgh handily. Then they lost to Edinburgh narrowly in the return. They beat Connacht narrowly, beat the Dragons handily, lost to Ospreys by a point, and then last time out then they beat Munster narrowly, although they were definitely the better of the two teams on that one, and I felt that the impact that came from their bench there really did bring them home in that game as well. And that could be another one for them here. I think the bench coming on and just adding that little bit extra to get them over the line. The Lions then losses against the Stormers, then the Bulls, then they beat the Stormers in the return. They lost against the Bulls again. Then they beat the Sharks, and then they lost against the Sharks in the return, and then they beat Cardiff lost to Cardiff last time out by 3 points. So yeah, Lions, they lost the last 2. They've only won one of the last 4. By contrast, Glasgow won 3 of the last 4. So Glasgow's certainly in the better form. And again, the Lions, another team who are up there, not just in the top 8, but in the top kind of 5 or 6, and then just losing away a little bit, and that's the way it is this year, right? You lose a couple on the bounce and you go from feeling like, not necessarily that you're comfortable, because I don't think any team can be comfortable that's from anywhere from 5th place down, but feeling like things are going in the right direction, that you're in the right spot and you're trying to progress from there, to suddenly you've been passed by all these other teams, and now you've got to fight your way back up again. And that's what's happened to a lot of teams is, they're in a good position, they drop down, have to fight their way up again, and then they maybe have a loss or 2 again, and then have to do it all over again. So that's happened, but that's a story of almost every team from 5th down to 14th, where the Scarlets are, and then Zebre kind of coming up on the rails there as well. But yeah, every one of those teams has that similar story this year, and whatever team of that pack, or whatever couple of teams of that pack can find actual consistency in these last 5 rounds, they're going to make the playoffs, and they're actually going to be going into the playoffs in, a fairly strong position. Obviously, you'd rather be in the top 4 and be at home. But if you're coming in, like Munster showed a couple of seasons ago, if you're coming in on good form, then, being away from home isn't necessarily going to be as big of a disadvantage for you, especially if you can get that first away win in the playoffs, then you're into a semi-final, and you really just have to lift your game, and you're in the final. But in this one, Glasgow 2nd place. They've only lost 2 of the last 7, whereas Lions have only won 2 of the last 7. So got to back Glasgow in that one. So I think Glasgow are going to win. The Lions going to be competitive as always. They're going to score, I think, some decent tries as well. They always do. But we thought maybe earlier on this season that this might be the year that the Lions step out of the shadow as kind of the other South African team, but at this point now it's looking less likely for them. But again, get a win here in this one, and all bets are off then for them, I think. But again, I think I'm going to go for a Glasgow win in that one. Okay, so that is our look ahead to the weekend's games. I'm going to watch as many as I can over the weekend and cover them here on the channel. Then we'll have a review of the round as well. That will come out probably on Monday. And then this weekend as well. Last weekend I didn't get to do it because, again, transitioning to a new job. But this weekend, I'm hoping to be able to cover as well the Women's Six Nations. I really wanted to cover it last week for the first round, the kickoff of the first round, but wasn't able to do it because basically I was in work when all the games were on, and then I got just to see a couple of the URC games in the end. But yeah, we'll try and do something on that as well this weekend. It may not be covering games as live, but we'll certainly have a roundup of the games if we can't do a preview for this weekend as well. Okay, so that's it for me. Let me know what you think down in the comments.